Hello and welcome to week 4 of the Softening series. This is 10 weeks of deepening my marriage, and I'm so grateful you're here. I'm so grateful that you are coming along with me on this journey and this exploration, especially as I'm going into a new transition, and hopefully as you are preparing for the new year and deepening your marriage as we approach 2026. So, today I wanted to talk to you about the conversations that I previously avoided and how softening helped me find my voice again. And honestly, I'm so grateful that you're here because I feel like this might be one of the most important blogs and videos that I've ever made. This is something I really, really believe in and something that I was stuck in for a long time. So I'll start out by saying that I am a naturally very peaceful, calm person. And so that did not stop me from controlling and trying to micromanage my husband. Definitely not. But what I mean by that is I feel very uncomfortable um, with arguments. I don't like tension. Tension stresses me out. And so although I was very nitpicky and micromanagey and controlling for a long time, I wouldn't outright try to stir the boat. In other words, I was causing a lot of arguments, but I didn't know why. I had no idea why at the time, right? But I wouldn't purposefully go out and try to rock the boat in my relationship. So when I did finally learn the intimacy skills and did start to realize just how controlling I was, even though I had no idea before, there was a time after that in my marriage when I thought intimacy meant silence. And I don't mean the kind of quiet where two people are coexisting and sharing space and you're enjoying each other's company in silence. That's not what I mean. I mean the tight, purse-lipped, don't rock the boat, don't need anything from anyone kind of silence. And when I first learned and began practicing the six intimacy skills, honestly, I misunderstood them completely. I misunderstood them in the deepest way. So instead of freeing me, I thought that they were confining me and stuffing me into this little box where, okay, I am safe as long as I don't rock the boat, right? As long as I'm not too much. And so when I heard stop criticizing, stop controlling, relinquish control, relinquish expectations, right? I somehow interpreted that as stop having needs, stop having desires, stop having emotions, stop being so sensitive, stop taking up space. So that's what I did. I went from being a woman who constantly complained and nitpicked my husband, which was my old coping mechanism, to swinging the pendulum way, way too far in the opposite direction that I nearly silenced myself out of existence. And so I stopped having desires and requests and vulnerable truths, no waves, no voice. I wasn't soft. I thought that's what being soft was, but I wasn't soft, right? I was duct taped, I was disappearing, and I wore it like a badge of spiritual maturity. I thought, this is what it is to be empowered. And the truth is, I thought, okay, it must be working because all of a sudden we weren't fighting anymore. So that was good, right? But at the same time, I was disappearing. And so for a while there, my new normal was just swallowing it all up, right? Adjusting, minimizing, and shrinking myself, trying so hard not to control that I no longer took up any room in my relationship. I was trying so hard to not criticize that I just stopped expressing myself altogether. And I convinced myself that this was growth. But what it actually was a slow heartbreak, a slow deterioration of everything that made me, me. I was losing sight of my values, my desires, my voice, and quite honestly, my magic. So I'll never forget a moment that now feels like a snapshot of that whole era. I was in the hospital bed laboring with our first child. And, I remember the contractions rolling in, and I was doing the primal stuff of life, right? And I remember my husband was, for a lot of the time that we were there, he's kind of just, sitting on the chair, scrolling on his phone. And in that old version of me, um, the old version before the skills, I would have complained and criticized him for that and been all over him, right? But this new evolved, quote unquote, evolved version, she said nothing. She duct taped and relinquished control. But here's the thing, I duct taped and relinquished control not because I felt peaceful, but because I felt muzzled. The truth was, I wanted his hand. I wanted his presence. I wanted him to be there with me, right? But more than that, higher than that desire, I wanted to prove that I could be a woman who needed nothing, who was skilled and empowered, a woman who didn't make waves, a woman who didn't turn her unmet needs into conflict. And so I duct taped. And I silently hurt and secretly resented, and none of that served me. And that's the problem here. That was the problem. So later, when we brought our baby home, the silence continued to echo even louder because no visitors were dropping by. I was getting very few calls and texts and, people checking in to see how I was doing or how the baby was doing. Honestly, I felt forgotten by my people, by my community. I felt alone. I felt overlooked and uncelebrated and unseen. And so I told myself, well, I guess this is what it means to relinquish expectations and control, right? This is what non-attachment looks like. I guess this is just adulthood. People are disappointing and it is what it is. But the truth, I did not feel at peace. I felt abandoned by the world and by myself. And so, what I understand now with so much gentleness for that version of me back then is this: my husband wasn't uninterested in me or in our child's birth. He was overwhelmed and unsure how to support me during that time because, hello, I never told him how he could, right? I kept it all to myself. My loved ones didn't stay away because they didn't care when I came home from the hospital with the baby, right? They truly thought that they were giving me space to bond and recover. Because again, I never told them I was craving their company. And so, really, none of them failed me. They simply couldn't read the desires I never voiced. The self betrayal wasn't that I desired more, it was that I silenced the desires altogether. And it took me years to understand that the intimacy skills weren't asking me to disappear after all. They were inviting me to soften into integrity, to express without demanding, to desire without manipulating, to invite without clutching, and to speak without shrinking. And so today I no longer silence myself in the name of relinquishing control. Instead, I use the skills to free my voice, not to cage it. Rather than restricting myself for fear of being too much, this is what I do now. I ask myself first what I would truly love. In other words, what is my vision here, right? And then I express that with warmth and invitation. And then I release the outcome, the timing, the expectations, and the control. And here's the beautiful part that I've learned from doing all that is that these days I do not feel disappointed by the people in my life. I feel chosen and held and known and supported and deeply, deeply loved because it turns out that not only do they, yeah, actually genuinely care, but they finally know how I love to be loved. There's no mind reading necessary. And this time around, as I prepare to welcome our next baby, I'm doing the thing that I was too afraid to do before. I'm saying the soft, real, vulnerable parts out loud. So I'm telling my husband, I would love counter pressure on my back during contractions. I would love a heating pad on my shoulders if the hospital room is cold. I would love fuzzy socks and a warm, delicious meal after birth. I would love conversation during labor and companionship and presence. And I'm telling my people, I would love visitors postpartum. Texts and calls mean the world to me. I love company while the baby naps, and I'm receiving all the help I can get. And most importantly, I'm reminding myself everyone in my life loves me and is doing their best. Their heart messages speak louder than any expectations ever could. I can express my desires with zero attachment to how they land. And my voice is the integrity. The outcome is not the measurement. That is the softening. That is the liberation. That is intimacy rooted not in silence, but in truth. And so here's what I want to invite you to this week if you are doing this and softening along with me. First, I want to ask you to reflect on what is the invisible box that you've built around yourself that keeps you small within your marriage. Maybe like me, it's the one labeled good partner, right? Easy wife, good teammate, low maintenance woman. I don't want to be too much. I'll be fine with the crumbs, right? Or maybe it's the box of the wife that holds everything together, the one that has to manage everything or nothing will ever get done, or the one who doesn't get to have play, pleasure, or joy because she's too busy taking care of everybody else, or the wife who tries so hard and still feels lonely and disappointed. Where have you shrunk in your marriage? Where have you locked down your heart's desires and been afraid to want more? And if you gently place your hand on your heart and asked, what is one vulnerable truth or pure desire I could express simply because I deserve to take up space? Not to change the outcome, not to manage your husband's or anyone else's response, not to get it right, but to claim the part of you that has every right to be vulnerable, to be sensitive, to have desires and to take up space. The part of you that has a spark of new life and hope. So maybe for you, it sounds like, I would love, or ouch, if your feelings are hurt, or I feel so loved when you hold me in your arms, right? I invite you to say this without tightening, without bracing, without rehearsing the other person's response, because this isn't about the other person's response. This is about reclaiming you, right? So say it because your voice has a place and it matters, not for the result, but for the reclamation of you. Can't say it enough. Your voice matters, and intimacy requires integrity. It asks you to come forward softly, truthfully, honestly, not from fear, not from control, not from strategy, but from integrity. A woman who expresses her desires or her vulnerability isn't demanding. She's remembering herself, and that remembering, more than any other outcome, is what brings you home. So you don't soften by disappearing like I once did. You soften by unarming. And there's nothing more tender, more powerful, and more magnetic than a woman who's found her voice again and speaks from love, not from resentment or expectation or control. And so this is what I'll be doing this week, right alongside you, if you're gonna take me up on my invitation, taking up space just a little more gently, speaking a little more authentically, and loving a little bit more vulnerably. And remember, you're not too much. You never were. If you're like me, you've just been learning to hold your voice with love. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for listening in. If you are new here, a great place to start is my free guide, 5 Steps to Reignite Connection in Your Marriage. And if you have thoughts about anything that I spoke about today and you would like to share them with me, I always love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to email me. You'll find that at the bottom of the blog post here. All right, take care, and I look forward to chatting with you again next week. Bye bye.